This began for me in 2006, the beginning of 2006. I was married, and I had been practicing the Buddha Dharma for about 12 years prior to this. And I was living in England, and my wife came home, and she said that there was a documentary on the Buddha. So I was really excited about seeing a new documentary. So I remember how excited I get about this. So I had popcorn and I had soda in there, and I remember my wife coming home, and she assumed her natural position, just laid straight out on the sofa with her feet on me, and I was really excited about seeing a new footage of the Buddha. And it wasn't the Buddha; it was the Discovery Channel on Dharma Sangha. About 20 minutes into it, they showed the first pictures of him after 10 months of meditating. His nails had grown really long and dirty, and his clothes were dirty, and he was filthy. And my wife said at that time, how filthy and disgusting is this young boy? And you're going to have to excuse me, because when I speak of him, I find it really emotional for me. So sometimes I'll stop for a second, so you'll have to excuse me. And my wife said, how disgusting is this young kid? Why isn't he in school? Where are his parents? And in my mind, it was completely different. I had saw somebody who was radiant, that just shone. I saw this picture, and my heart started beating quickly. I felt hot, and I thought to myself, he's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. And so we finished the documentary. My wife continued on with her ranting about how disgusting he was. So I kept my mouth shut and just thought, well, I'll let her have her view and I'll have my own. Well, I recorded this, and the next day she came home from work, I was watching it again. And then the next day she came home and I was watching it again. And this went on over a month, and I was obsessed with it. I was telling Ganga and Tara, in the middle of the night, I would wake up and go downstairs and put it on and freeze frame things and just stare at him in darkness and just watch him. And it became extremely overwhelming. I couldn't do anything because all I wanted to do was to see him, whether it was a picture, a video, whatever. So my wife said to me, why don't you go to Nepal and visit him? So I said, okay. But soon after that, he spoke for the first time in about 2 years, and he said, let me be. He said, let me complete my 6-year meditation and then come. So I wanted to respect this, so I waited for about 4 years. So my wife and I had separated. We went in different paths. And I decided to teach English so I could travel around a little bit. So I got a job in Europe. My mother's English. So I was in England, and I traveled around. Then I went to Vietnam. And then when I was in Vietnam, I met a Buddhist abbot at this old monastery who didn't speak to people. And one day when I walked by, he told one of his attendants, tell that man to come here. So I walked over to him, and he said, soon something extraordinary is going to happen to you. And then that was the end of the conversation. And I just thought, how wonderful. I was thinking, I wasn't thinking anything like enlightenment. I was thinking, wow, maybe I'll get some money. I was thinking very materialistically about what I could have. I was like, well, this is going to be nice, get a car. And we're in Vietnam, and everybody has mopeds. So I was thinking I can get a nice moped or whatever. And my girlfriend, I had a new girlfriend at this time, and her name was Millie. So the 6 years was coming to a close. So I told my girlfriend, do you want to come to Nepal to see somebody I'm very interested in? And she agreed. We got to Nepal. I didn't know who to contact, so I looked online, and I found a man who was connected to him, a guy called Dawa. And so I called him up, and he said, yes, I speak to him quite often. Why don't you come to my house? I have a family house, and there's Westerners here. He does trekking, and he owns an orphanage. Why don't you come? So we went to his house, and he said, in 2 weeks, maybe there's some more people coming, and we'll go out to the jungles to go see him. So we said, okay. Well, at about 9 o'clock that night, he had a little daughter named Mary, and she stopped breathing. So her face went blue, her lips went blue, and she had died for a few minutes. So they ran her to the hospital. And so my girlfriend and I went to bed, Millie, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, he came into the room, and he said, wake up, we're going to the jungle now. So I said, okay. His daughter was okay. I think she had a hole in her heart, but now she's fine. He said, we're going to go to the jungle, and we're going to see him now to get a blessing. So I said, okay. So we arrived at 9 o'clock in the morning. It takes about 7 hours in a Jeep. We arrived at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my girlfriend said to me, what do I say when I see him? I told my girlfriend, Millie, if he is who I think he is, it doesn't matter what you do externally, because he knows internally what you're feeling. So I said, you can just walk in, say hi, and walk out, whatever it is you want to do. So she walked in and she came out and she was crying. And she said, something like, what the hell is that? I said, I don't know. I said, that's why we're here. We're here to figure out what this could be. And so she sat outside. She was really upset. So I walked into the room, and I had never bowed to anybody before. The only thing I'd ever bowed for were idols. I'd been very close to Jesus and the Buddha. So I bowed before images, but never to a living being. And so I walked into the room, and he was sitting on the ground about the same as Tracy. He's really tiny. He's really small. He's just got this long black hair, and his robes are wrapped around him. And I bent down, and he opened his eyes, and it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. And I had been with different teachers in my life as well, but this was something completely different. I told my family, there were two stories. One was, imagine a keyhole that's this big, and there's two of them. And imagine looking into a universe that is the size of the ocean, the size of a universe. And you're trying to encompass this ocean that is infinite through two small holes, and you're trying to absorb it all. And that's what it was like. I looked through it, and there was nothing. There was no vibration on the water. It was perfectly still. And I started to cry, and I held his gaze for about 10 seconds, and it became a bit much for me. So I turned around and walked off. And the monk in the room said, do you have something you want to say to him? And I'm very philosophical. I read everything from all the Buddhist scriptures, Hindus, Christian, I read everything. So I had lots of philosophical questions. Is there a soul? Is there not a soul? Atma, Paratma, all these kind of thoughts. And the only thought that came to my mind was, I asked him, would you bless my mother? And he said, yes. So I got up and I walked out, and my girlfriend said, we're going home. Tomorrow morning I'm leaving. I didn't want to leave. So I asked her, give me 24 hours. And that night I prayed to him. I said, let me stay. I said, I don't want to go home. I want to stay here with you to find out what you are and why have you done these things that you've been doing. So the next morning, Millie woke up, and I asked her, I said, are we going home? She said, no. She said, we're going to stay the 6 weeks like you want. And I said, why? She said, I had a dream of him last night. And so I said, oh, okay. And I asked her, I said, what was your dream? She said, in the jungle where we live, there's two jungles. His first tree, he meditated under a papal tree. The second tree is a banyan tree. And according to, I read up on the Hindu Dharma, when these Dharma turner comes, they go under different trees. The Buddha was under a papal. The next one would be under a banyan tree. So it seemed to make sense. I had high expectations that this was something spectacular. So from his first tree to his second tree, there's about a mile long of like golden wheat. It's like a golden grass that separates these two jungles to his second tree. And it's about 500 meters wide. Millie said in her dream, she got up and she walked out of her tent and she stood up on this hill. It's about 10 feet high, and you could look over the field. She said there were thousands of monks in maroon and yellow clothes, bent down, picking up flowers or something like this. She said, but there was one that was different, and he wore white. And when he stood up and faced her, he illuminated everything. And she said from that, she sensed that she too should stay. It wasn't just about, I guess maybe about me, that maybe she decided she wanted to investigate this a bit further herself.